So, Conor Benn's application to box Chris Eubank Jr. in the UK has been rejected by the British Boxing Board of Control. The General Secretary of the British Boxing Board of Control, Robert Smith, did an interview with TalkSport where he said that they do not consider the investigation into the positive drug test that Benn returned last year to be complete. To quote him directly, he said, "The board feel that any athlete, not just a boxer, but any athlete who has failed a drugs test needs to go through an investigation with the proper authorities, and that hasn't happened. We're waiting for that to happen, and the Boxing Board and UKAD have been pushing for that to happen right from the beginning of this. And unfortunately, it's been delayed. Not through the Boxing Board of Control or UKAD, but through other parties. With regards to Mr. Benn boxing in this country, we have had an application for him to box in this country that has been refused. They can put out whatever they want ultimately, but they haven't been through the proper authorities. And as I said before, we're really keen to get this done right from the beginning. All right, those are the words of Robert Smith, the General Secretary of the British Boxing Board of Control. Now, Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn have been trying to mislead the public right from the very beginning of this saga. When Benn initially tested positive, he refused to hand over his evidence to UKAD so that they could investigate and then inform the British board on whether or not Benn should be suspended. So the British board rightly refused to sanction the bout, at which point the two little rich boys, Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn, threw their toys out of the pram and started smearing the board in the media, claiming that they had some type of vendetta against Conor Benn and were treating him unfairly. What a load of absolute rubbish. You tell me what other British fighter who failed multiple PED tests did what Conor Benn did, refusing to comply with the investigation and smearing the board in the media. What other British fighter has ever done that? The unusual behavior in this situation was never coming from the board. It was coming from Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn, trying to make out as though Benn was being hard done by. Absolute nonsense. And then Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn were trying to arrange a fight overseas to circumvent due process because they just would not hand in their evidence to UKAD for investigation. But when they were unable to fight abroad, they then handed their evidence into the WBC to allow them to investigate it, which was a sham really because the WBC have no power to ban boxers. They rank boxers, but there are 3 other world sanctioning bodies that rank boxers as well. The WBC can't ban anyone from fighting in any country. And the WBC do not have a particularly high burden of proof. So when they concluded their investigation, they said that Conor Benn probably consumed contaminated eggs. Probably. They made a supposition, and that's good enough for them, apparently. Incredibly, Conor Benn came out and said, no, it wasn't contaminated eggs. And he was angry at the WBC for suggesting it was. He insisted that it was lab contamination. After scrambling around trying to fight overseas for a long time with no success, Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn begrudgingly, eventually after several months, handed their evidence into UKAD, at which point Benn was provisionally suspended, pending their investigation. Then they launched this media campaign again, putting these experts in the media to talk on Benn's behalf, paid experts, that he's paid for. And all of a sudden he does a 180. He'd previously said that the failed test had nothing to do with contaminated eggs, it was lab contamination, but now he's saying it was contaminated eggs after all. I mean, you couldn't make it up. And this media campaign was clearly designed to try and put pressure on the British Boxing Board of Control to exonerate him. If your evidence is so strong as Conor Benn was making it out to be, you don't need to put public pressure on the board. Your evidence should speak for itself, but apparently not. And when Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn realized their evidence wasn't going to be strong enough, they decided to try and circumvent due process once again. Now, some people claim that they've used a loophole over jurisdiction, whereby because Conor Benn isn't licensed by the British Boxing Board of Control, and the testing agency that found the substance in his system wasn't previously recognized by the British Boxing Board of Control, because of course they exclusively use UKAD, then there should be no legal basis for the board to ban Conor Benn. That's what some people are claiming, and it makes perfect sense to me. Eddie Hearn has said that that isn't the case. But what we know from the British Boxing Board of Control themselves is that there hasn't been a hearing with the British board to determine Conor Benn's fate. Conor Benn and his team have used some legal means to avoid that hearing. They went to the National Anti-Doping Panel, an organization that UKAD are ostensibly subordinate to. They used whatever legal loophole and they managed to get the suspension lifted. Again, not by exonerating Benn based on the evidence, but through some type of legal loophole. And again, during this time, Benn and Eddie Hearn are smearing the board in the press, saying the board are being unreasonable, when it's actually them who are being unreasonable, trying to circumvent due process every step of the way. And then they've got the audacity, especially Eddie Hearn, to come out and act like they've been trying to be cooperative from the very start. It's been literally the exact opposite. They've been completely uncooperative from the start. And not only have they been uncooperative, but they've been constantly smearing the board in the press for not allowing them to walk right over the board. The sense of entitlement that Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn have is absolutely incredible. I've never seen anything like it. And this campaign to deceive the public is working apparently, because there are a lot of people. There was somebody in my Element group, and I'm sure there are going to be people on this video in the comments section who are sympathizing with Conor Benn and who believe that the British board are trying to make an example out of him, i.e. they're treating him in an overly harsh manner. I don't understand this, folks. The British board have just been trying to do their job right from the very start. The only reason this is dragged out for so long is because of the actions of Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn. Mainly Conor Benn, of course, because ultimately he calls the shots on what he wants to do. What the British board have done is stand their ground and not allow these two rich boys to just walk all over them. Why should they allow Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn to walk all over them, smear them in the press, and do all this kind of stuff when they're just trying to do their job? Please explain that to me. Like I said earlier on, tell me which other British fighter has ever behaved like this when they've failed a test. You tell me. If Conor Benn had just cooperated with the process, this all would have been resolved long ago. It's as simple as that. It's been dragging out because he's refusing to cooperate with the process. Even still now, he's refusing to cooperate with the process, exploiting legal loopholes to get around it. What do you suggest the board should do? Just put their hands up and say, oh, fair enough, we'll just let it go. What kind of precedent does that set? The next time a boxer fails a test, if they have the money, they might try and do what Conor Benn did. Just wait them out because they think they'll get what they want in the end, just like Conor Benn did. And also legally, it's like, well, you let Conor Benn off, so you better let me off too. They have to stand firm. They can't allow fighters and promoters to just steamroll them like this. Or else then you've got a situation where the fighters and promoters are making the rules up as they go along. And that's what Conor Benn and Eddie Hearn tried to do, by the way. Imagine how absurd this is. When Conor Benn initially tested positive, he and Hearn were so arrogant that they said the board should just allow the fight to go ahead because they conducted their own internal investigation. Benn did an investigation of himself. And he said, yep, that's good enough. UKAD don't need to be involved. I'm telling you here, Robert Smith, British Boxing Board of Control, that I've investigated myself, I've put a team on it, and I'm absolutely innocent. We can go ahead with the fight. That is literally what Conor Benn did. And they tried to make out as though that was something reasonable. And that the British board were being unreasonable by not accepting it. The audacity is incredible. And you guys, some of you guys are sitting there acting like, oh, the British board are being harsh. What on earth? Let me just stop there. Because people, I don't get it. I don't get how anyone could be sympathizing with Conor Benn. I'm going to end the video here before I have an aneurysm. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And before I go, I want to give a shout out to all the new subscribers to my Patreon page. I cover loads of different topics in my weekly podcast, as you can see on screen right now, from current events to deep dives down the rabbit hole and everything in between. I'm really enjoying the feedback and the discussions we've been having on there lately. So if you'd like to join the conversation, just click the link in the description box below. Are you sick and tired of the mainstream mindset? Does the dogmatic conformity and pathological ignorance have you tearing your hair out in frustration? Then don't be alone. Come and join our brotherhood on Patreon. We stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. You'll gain access to my weekly topical podcast where we take more deep dives than Jacques Cousteau on an endless variety of subjects. There's also videos, interviews, live Q&As, as well as a vast back catalogue of previous episodes, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen via the Patreon app or download in high quality MP3. Connect with myself and hundreds of other members in our Element chat group. There's no contract, no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a Mickey D's McMuffin. Just head to my Patreon page via the link below this video and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. I'll see you over there.